Hello again, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of the AJ Roberts Show. Today we are live from my HQ. We've got a fantastic guest with us today, veteran of the Royal Marines, former Royal Marines Commando, Stephen Forsyth. Thanks for joining us today, buddy.
My absolute pleasure. Good to be here.
Steve, as I said, is a former Royal Marines Commando, served in multiple operations around the world, and also a former director of a security and logistics company that operated mainly in Afghanistan and the Middle East. I asked Steve to come on the show today because of his insights from a military perspective of what's going on in the world right now, what we're seeing within the veteran community, but also down the lines of like the financial situations, which Steve is very, very switched on with and are very adverse to during obviously his time, not just in the military, but working in places like the Middle East and other operational areas around the world. Steve, do you want to just give us a bit of a background about your military history first, buddy?
Yeah, I mean, I joined the Royal Marines in '89. Mm-hmm. I left the latter part of '95, so I was 26 years old when I left the military, and ever since then I've sort of dipped my toes in and out like we do. You know, they call it the circuit, doing security, maritime side of things as well. First place I operated overseas was Pakistan. We did a team task over there. Came back, tried to do something else again, ended up in Australia, thought I'd go travelling and expand my horizons. Ended up staying in a youth hostel, working for probably the wealthiest man in Australia, carrying a 9mm Glock. Came back from there, tried to get out of it again. Got a call, was asked to go and with a forward team into Iraq, set up all the camps prior to the deployment of the troops. I then came back from there, went to Afghanistan, and that's where my real experience started to kick in. I was sent down to Kandahar as the regional manager, responsible for Uruzgan, Helmand, Nimroz, Spin Boldak. The first task out there was the currency exchange, and that's when I first got introduced to the World Bank, the IMF, and the United Nations. And then after that, we were responsible for doing the Lloyd Jirga, which is the meeting of obviously all the shuras and mullahs, the elders, trying to coordinate a pre-election scenario. So we were initially working with the Secretariat, which is the Afghan councils, the governor, and because of having previous military experience, we coordinated with the troops on the ground at the airfield and the PRT teams, and they assisted us with different logistic movements, getting people into the areas. And then straight after that, we did the election process, which was a success. And having completed that, I decided, I came back. I was wondering what to do with myself, so I set up my own consultancy business. Picked up clients, major telecommunication clients, law firms, started building people's business continuity plans as things were just starting to sort of heat up here with various incidents. We provided close protection teams for conferences in Morocco, Jordan, etc. And then I wanted to get back into a different environment, so I sort of chanced my arm and bid on a US government contract and was awarded it. So I had to quickly scarper around and try and raise the funding. And I ended up with a relatively small team, about 90 people, 7 armoured vehicles, and we produced the force protection, as it were, for the local trucks moving backwards and forwards from the FOBs delivering the goods on behalf of the US military. So we only initially went there with a 12-month contract, and then we got extended, and then eventually it came to an end when they decided to pull out and lost the arming licence, and that was the end of my sort of time in the security business. And I've come back here and I still keep my hand and dabble in it to a certain extent. I'm still an associate and an advisor, and this is how all of this sort of has come together for me, because I was putting an evacuation plan to move staff out of China and Hong Kong early January 2020. So that's where it all sort of ties in up to date.
So what would the evacuation plan would have been for exactly? Obviously, looking at the bigger picture here, because obviously people watching at home would think, "Oh, why do they need to evacuate?"
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, it's probably not the right terminology. It was a repatriation plan. It was initially a risk assessment to see if what we were seeing through the media was in line with the intel that we could gather from knowing people on the ground. And the corporate company I was working for wanted to make a decision as to whether to pull their staff out of a potentially dangerous area because they had businesses in different locations. And that's when we discovered pretty early on that for something that was being portrayed over here in the media as being so, incredibly dangerous, it was actually contained in Wuhan. It didn't really spread. Why that was closed down, Shanghai, Beijing was still open for business. So it made me feel a bit uneasy. But, they have a carer duty, so they made the right decision, for them and just, pulled the staff out. But that then set me on another sort of road, actually realising pretty soon after that with, re-looking at plans and seeing when it would be safe to put the staff back in because they wanted to get their businesses up and running quickly. We know, this is old news now, but I think sometimes it's important to go over historical stuff and remind yourself how we actually came to be where we are now. The declassification of COVID from a highly infectious disease to a non-highly infectious disease on the 19th of March, and then putting us into a lockdown on the 24th of March, 5 days later. That was really the big red flag, and I think it was for a lot of people. But so that's up to that date where we are. And then obviously the last 2 years, we've got military backgrounds, but we've still felt the pain. My father died 3 weeks after having his jab. It's been a divisive time for the majority of people across the UK. I'm just so pleased. When I first started going to London last year, then there's 10,000, and then we've been there this year. You look at 1.5 million, 2 million people are suddenly, seeing what's going on from a different perspective. And I think that's why having this discussion today and actually trying to break things down, I think it's very clear to see that we know there is a global agenda because it's being rolled out country by country by country. But so many people have come up to me, especially since we've taken the initiative to start actually donning our berets to show a presence and show that there is, I've said this before, a force that the public pay for and, go to and are confiding and feel comfortable with because they know that we, by nature, we're there to protect them. Is
something that they've not felt for some time because there's been no protection. It's been very much suppression, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And the constant question is, well, where's the military? Why aren't we being protected? Because people have educated themselves now. They're now seeing the effects. They're seeing the lies and the skullduggery and the constant. We're seeing it ahead of time, but this is a process we've all had to go through. Because this is the deconstruction of a system that have indoctrinated us, basically, and enslaved us. And I can see the methodology that's being used, because we discussed this, I think, when we first met, and we've met people who actually operate at a scientific level, who have told us categorically that this is the largest psychological military-grade warfare ever conducted on the general population, and I think that's on a global scale.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and I think off the fallout of COP26, for example, you've only got to look at, as soon as that shut down, what the messaging has been like from these different countries. It's almost like that event was used to refine their messaging, get it all on point, and as soon as that event finished, it was literally Austria straight out of the bag. Unvaccinated people locked down from X date. Germany, we're going to follow suit. Italy strengthening what they're doing. France, turning the dial up. Australia turning the dial up. Other countries, Cypruses, Greeces, and stuff like that have gone completely full, creating two-tier societies pretty much, which is it's been horrible to see. And I think in UK, obviously, many people watching from UK will probably be thinking well, I don't see it on my doorstep. But yes, that's a good thing for now. But two, it's the punch in the face that you'll get when suddenly it hits home is going to feel so much harder if you haven't opened your eyes really to the extent of what's actually going on worldwide. So for all the military people, for example, who's ridiculed me over the last 12 months, saying that I'm talking shit, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. We all know, we've been there. You're kind of almost tunnel visioned in the military, aren't you? You just get up in the morning. We've had this conversation so many times with so many other serving people that have reached out to us, that you get up, you go to PT, or you do this, or you do that. You've got your medical and your dentals all squared away. You've always got a roof over your head. So your need to think for yourself in the grand scheme of things is far less than what you do as a civilian. Because you've got a lot less stresses, a lot less worries. So you just kind of become institutionalised, like so many people that we know, and then they've not had a reaction, for example, or they don't know someone directly next to them have had a reaction. So their question is what are you talking about? And we totally get it, but the grand scheme of thing is, this is without doubt the biggest psychological war that's ever been put on people. Even more so since the Second World War, because what we're facing here is a bioweapon being used on people that is a ticking time bomb for many. And that's the nature of it. That's the nature of the weapon. It's designed to not initiate en masse severe adverse reactions and death, because obviously that would be game over.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's very much like, this is what's in it. It breaks down your immune system over time. Hence why I've had so many people reaching out to me who initially thought 6 months ago I was a nut job, that are now suffering with autoimmune diseases.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I've categorically said they can now see it for what it is, and are absolutely gutted, devastated, angry at the governments, angry at their doctors for coercing them into getting it, angry at their superiors, their peers, which is what we're still seeing on a grand scale now. We've got people in the military reaching out to us, talking to us about how worried and concerned they are that their soldiers are being coerced into taking this, what legal action can be done. Now, I asked this question, if there wasn't such a fucking issue, why would these people be saying this? Why would they be reaching out? Why would 1.5 million people be hitting the streets of London? Why, on the same day, in every major city around the world, you've got mass protests from 100,000 upwards? Okay, they're the questions that I ask people to ask themselves. If there wasn't a serious issue, why would these people be out in their droves?
And it's not just. You look at the whole of the planet at the moment. There's people week in, week out. Italy, France, Germany, like you say, Australia. Massive respect to them, because they're having it tough, and we've both lived there as well.
And I must say, actually, on that, to those people watching that are doing this week out, you have my absolute utmost respect. You are unbelievable human beings to be able to realise the threat to humanity here, not just within your own circles, your own direct family, but also to your friends and family, because we know that's why you're out there. It's not just for you, it's for them. It always has been.
Yeah. They are the real heroes. People go out. We met at a stand in the park. These people were going out and standing in the cold, trying to, they're getting ridiculed by people because they're not understanding. This is why, again, just in conversation with you, is trying to, because everybody's been so consumed over the last 2 years, it's good to try and encapsulate it from a military perspective, to just, even if this is to just show that there is someone in the shadows actually doing something, because this constant question I'm getting is, where is the military? Now, the military here have been pretty much inactive, but I've said to you, I know a lot of people don't like talking about the American side of this, but it's pivotal, because America's budget is 10 times larger than the rest of the 9 countries behind them in the top 10 list put together.
But budget aside, just on that, look at the amount of people in the UK.
Exactly.
If I said to the majority of people, have you heard of Dr. Fauci? The answer is always no.
Yeah.
Have you heard of gain of function research? The answer is no. Have you heard of the NIH? The answer is no.
Yeah.
All three of those are very much linked together, and the root of what we're seeing from a bioweapon point of view, not the psychological warfare, but those three things, because it was produced in a Wuhan lab through gain of function research funded by the NIH for this Dr. Fauci. So if you're in the UK, please go and research Dr. Fauci, not on Google, use DuckDuckGo. And you'll see the extent of the funding that this man has been given over a number of years, which has caused millions of deaths, because even through the Ebola trials, that's when they were testing remdesivir, which has been used to kill thousands of people in American hospitals.
Yeah.
Going back to the States again. And 53% of the people that were given remdesivir during the Ebola trials died. And it was all during his funding, his research. Yeah. So this guy is like a modern day Hitler in essence.
Mangle.
And a lot of people in the UK have never even heard of this guy. And again, this just goes to show how pivotal, going back to what you said, the United States is in this whole thing.
It's massive, and obviously because I had this burning desire and knowing that we were in a war, because it was so you could see country by country by country following the same suit. It was, you could tell it was an agenda and quite a specific targeting of the population in the same way. And when you actually start to dig, and then you see the amount of money that the governments were being given from the WHO to implement these measures, you start to build a picture. And I've lost my train of thought, actually.
Well, speaking about the WHO and the actual measures and the amount of money that the country has, I mean, Belarus's president was very quick to point this out well over a year ago, wasn't he? That they were offered several million, and he said it in front of I think it was an industrial plant he was in, and he said it to all the people there, that one day you'll find out the extent of these, how sinister this all is. And we've been offered millions and millions and millions by the UN, WHO, and the World Banks to crash their economy, to lock everyone down, to basically install fear. There's a video of him saying it out loud to the people of Belarus, and he's still very vocal about it now. And he's not done that. He's not locked people down. He's not done any of that. I think it was something in the region of 900 sort of million that they were offered. But if you can imagine Belarus is being offered that, imagine countries like UK and are being paid to do what they do. And obviously the people at the top, that are clearly set on this agenda, part of this new world order, which is very much what it is.
Yeah, and I guess, what I wanted to know and feel comfort in, that if we were at war, that there was a good element actually assisting us, because you have to have a good and the bad side. So, I think the easiest way to sort of explain it and why I went down the route I did is obviously the person that we both admire, the Lieutenant Colonel, the 24 years in the SAS, Ricardo Bossi. He did his most amazing podcast in these 57 minutes, but most people were sharing it because of the incredible rant that he did.
Absolute outburst.
But I was more interested in the content and the hidden messages, which is obviously what we've been utilising to sort of read between the lines with everything, because we know that they do it, and obviously the counter would do the same. But he says, he talks about D-Day and the war, and the D-Day being the optics. But all the hard lifting, all the enemy troops being dropped behind enemy lines, all the countermeasures, taking out the telecommunication channels, putting food caches in place, tampering with ammunition, all that has been done prior to your D-Day. And so in order to try and actually prove that theory, and actually, so we're in a war scenario. So what I've had to do is then I've had to look for signs that are showing me that there is something going on behind enemy lines. So we started looking, we picked up very early on during lockdown, there was a massive increased movement of aircraft. And this is when we saw, which is now common knowledge, all that 660 odd planes going from Rome to America. And then we started picking up on the earthquake movement, plus the air traffic around Guantanamo Bay was huge and increased. So we were like, great, this is exciting. We've got all these planes going into Guantanamo Bay, that's a prison, what else is going on? And then we look at all the CEOs. If you look at this, all this, I checked briefly this morning just on it. So I'd like people just to go away, really, and just check what I'm saying, because it does piece it together. It does qualify our suggestion that this is a global war, without a shadow of a doubt. Mm-hmm. So we started following the earthquakes, and this was a year ago. And there was a particular guy who's an expert on the seismic thing. My mate's an IT geek. So he said to me, do you realise? He said, all these earthquakes are all at the same depth, all at 10k, all in a line. So it's obviously some sort of tunnelling system there. They're destroying.
And they're all on the map. I've seen the maps. They're all on what a normal everyday person would assume is the tectonic plates.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing is, he said, an earthquake has a P and an S resonance. So you have two seismic. You have the initial tremor and then the quake. I'm not a scientist, but he said. Then we started looking, well, how would they be doing that? And then we looked into the weapon systems they were using, the rods of God, which is a tungsten steel shaft that's deployed from the satellites. And I was like, we saw loads of satellites go up during lockdown. The signature of that weapon system is a sonic boom. So bring that into like what's happened in the last week here with the earthquake in Yorkshire, the one in Wales, the one in Scotland. It's actually in the mainstream media now. They've said, it felt like an earthquake, but it was a sonic boom. So that's another telltale sign that a year ago when we were saying that, people were saying we were crazy. They're now talking about it in the mainstream. Mm-hmm. But
so just for the benefit of the viewers, now obviously you're talking about using this weaponry system to collapse tunnel systems.
Yes, yeah.
So these tunnel systems obviously have been, I found out about this like quite a long time ago. Obviously, I've done a lot of research on it as well. There's obviously I've spoken to people that have unfortunately been in the tunnels as victims of satanic abuse that know where they are, especially obviously UK-based ones. But obviously, what we're seeing, and I've seen from a military perspective, is you've got a huge amount of tunnel systems that go from the Vatican to Israel.
That's right,
like 1,500 miles long.
Yeah.
And they've actually got transportation systems.
They have, yeah.
And the ability to move things around. And again, if you're watching this the first time, you probably think I'm a nut job. I can assure you I'm not. Okay, I've got an affidavit. But this has been well researched, and there's millions of people around the world who are actually aware of all this. Because when I actually started speaking to a few people, even like my family and like my cousin, for example, in Australia, he was like, "No, mate, I've known about that for years."
Yeah.
And I was just like, "Christ, I didn't know how well known it was." So going back to what you were saying then, the military alliance, what we're seeing is happening around the world, and what BOCES touched on in quite a little bit of detail, without giving it away too much in his interviews, is that this military alliance is actively collapsing these tunnels because they're being used for child trafficking.
Yeah, it's taking down infrastructure. We're using what we said about D-Day as the analogy. There's certain operations that have been ongoing that show significant signs that there's military activity. Now, just to qualify that, there was a Pentagon task force put together in 2019 with the sole purpose of stopping global child trafficking. And I had no idea when I started dipping my toes into the whole children, the magnitude of it was mind-blowing. I had no idea 8 million children a year are taken, trafficked, organ harvested, whatever, but they're taken every single year. go on the global missing child's list, easy to verify. 112,000 children from the UK. Now,
That's massive.
It's huge. It's like a primary school, virtually a primary school.
A whole primary school day. And if you think of the small island we're on, and as parents, and then I don't personally know a single kid who's gone missing, right? So people will be asking themselves, where did they all come from then, 112,000? Well, I mean, we've got a very broken social service system.
And we've also got a very controlled media system, which are the biggest perpetrators of this crime against humanity we're currently going through. We've heard of one child in the last 15 years that's constantly been mentioned who's gone missing. You know, there's got to be something more significant to that. But that's probably a whole other story to talk about for that. But then, you know, okay, let's talk about the infrastructures that have been taken out. Significant. The Bears vaccine factory in Germany. Explosion.
Again, it's not really publicised, is it?
No. Well, I mean, you can Google this now and find everything I'm going to say. But because we've been so consumed for the last 2 years, it's hard to thread all this together.
And we're being consumed on the things that affect us at a direct level. So at the minute, obviously they brought out this new transformer variant, Omicron.
The moronic.
Yeah. Oh. The moronic variant. Yeah. But obviously at the same time they then ramped up or dialed up having to use masks in shops and transport again. So obviously everybody's attention is very much on this, regardless of what side of the fence you're on. However, there's a very, very big court case started at the same time, which they don't want you to look at.
To do with child trafficking.
And it's all to do with child sexual assault, sexual abuse, child trafficking. And it has, again, it's easily accessible. It has a very, very large number of celebrities, politicians, people with knighthoods that are actually, and big corporations that are actually on this list. People you never would have thought of. Again, this is easily accessible to actually see the number of people on this list that over quite a number of years have been exploiting child trafficking, moving children around. There's an air stewardess that I'm going to be speaking to soon who worked in VIP transportation and said that on a daily basis you'd see celebrities and politicians flying off places with children that weren't theirs. And that's the extent of it, isn't it?
It is.
Again, it's all optics.
And it's not very palatable, is it? It's something that people don't really want to go there or talk about. But it is, I would say, the biggest problem with this is the pandemic, is the children. Obviously, what's happening with their bioweapon that they're using is, you know, we can't even.
We can't imagine what's going to happen.
No.
You know, so that in itself is a huge, chaotic, measure that they've put in place. But we know that these vaccines are very much the driver towards the vaccine passports, the digital ID, the social credit system. Because whether you again go back to the people that said, "Well, nothing's wrong with me, I feel fine." We genuinely hope that these people have had a placebo, hence why they're not getting any
adverse reactions,
right? But to obviously get all that huge number of people vaccinated is the data they need to see how they implement then the vaccine passports. Because if there was no uptake, you couldn't bring a passport, right? But then if you double vaccinated 40 million people, and they were all the same levels of graphene oxide, hydrogen, which was going to cause mass damage in a short space of time, no one is ever going to get a booster. Nobody would ever get a vaccine passport. So you've got to have a mixture across the
I mean that was the sort of thread I was going on with the Bayer's vaccine plant in Germany. And then the largest vaccine manufacturer factory, the BioNTech in India. And then the Thompson
also blown up.
Yeah, and then there was one in Cape Town as well,
blown up. And
then there was the Thompson one in Hull, and fire. So,
and then the Rockefeller building.
Then you've got the Rockefeller. Then you've got the church. You see, right back in 2019, I got this really when the Notre Dame Cathedral set alight. I sort of parked that away, but it didn't sit well with me. I thought it was so significant, and it was in the media a lot. And then over the last 18 months, there's been significant churches in Azerbaijan, in Israel. Most recently, the church in Madrid was blown up. So these are strategic targets, and you can see it because if you were your intention from, let's call them the good guys and the bad guys, if your intention was to roll out a genocidal vaccination program and make billions out of vaccines, which is pretty much the thread of where everyone goes with this, you wouldn't be blowing up your own manufacturing plants that produce the vaccines. So it's putting all this together, which you can literally take 10 minutes, go on Google and just go, Bears vaccine factory, India, largest vaccine factory in the world, Cape Town vaccine factory, and you go, shit, someone's actually doing something. We are in this is a silent, this is a psychological, high-tech cyber war. But there is activity going on that you can, and I think this is why it was so important to watch that Ricardo Bossi podcast, because it doesn't do any harm to go over historical events. Because we are literally only talking 2 years ago, but if you started asking, do you remember the vaccine factory that got blown up? When someone comes to me and says, what are the military doing? And they go, I didn't hear about that. And this is in been in the mainstream media for the last 18 months. But then you've got to think to yourself, how many people got so sick of the people that are awake, that actually understand what's going on? How many of them turn their televisions off and actually aren't keeping up to date with current events and everything else? It's only stuff that's shared on particular groups of interest, particularly like military groups or whatever, that like seeing explosions and things set in a line. So there's all that in play. That's why I think it's good to go over this old territory and try and pull it all together, because it's not to put people in a place of hope, but it's also to put the people that are still continuing to perpetrate these crimes on notice. Yeah. The paramedics, who we know are coming around because they're walking with us in London. The police, we know because we're in touch with some former police officers. The military, we know. So,
and on the military side of things as well, obviously the number of veterans that are completely wide awake to what's going on now is literally growing by the day, and we're even seeing, like, obviously we've been to like majority of the marches in London, right? We're even seeing the presence of veterans like growing massively, and which is great to see. And we go back to the optics side of things with just guys turning up and girls like wearing their lids, and straight away the public there get a sense of reassurance that they're not in this on their own, and they haven't just been walking the streets of London for over a year for nothing. There's obviously I get veterans coming to me every single day asking what they can do to help. Can they do stuff within their local communities? Like, they want to do something, because we've got that nature in us, right? We want to protect, and we want to serve, and we want to do the best by our people, or humanity in general, because we've seen what evil looks like, right? We've seen it in the face. Majority of people haven't, and when you see stuff, you can't unsee it. But when you've seen the fallout of like genocide in countries, like Balkans and places like that, when you've seen like severe poverty, when you've seen manipulation and psychological warfare used on the poorest of people, when you've seen people killed, maimed, blown up, exactly. You can't unsee that stuff.
When you see the media stood somewhere, reporting live, saying they're in a particular place and they're actually not. They're in another place. You also understand the manipulation of the media as well. I'm not going to mention any specifics on that, but it's threading the whole picture together. I mean, just a question sort of between us and anyone that's watching. Do you think there's going to be a bit of embarrassment within the military community when they sort of realise they have their awakening moment? Because I think it's something that is worth discussing, because I don't think there's any shame in not having seen what is going on.
I don't think it'll be an embarrassment for the lower level the lower ranks, to be honest.
No.
I think it will be an embarrassment, and I do genuinely hope that there's a lot of guilt in there as well from senior commanders who up till now they've been pressurised, right, in getting their troops vaccinated. But you only have to have a look again at the DMs and the emails that I get from serving personnel who are literally just so fed up to the eyeballs with the coercion levels and the threats of not being able to deploy, the threats of being demoted and all this kind of stuff over a vaccine, right? But then you've got like the people who have been vaccinated. Well, what's the big point? Why do they get it? It's just a vaccine. Well, it's not. Okay, it's not like we've all had our jabs in the military. I even had anthrax, okay, which is horrendous. And it was a good job there was no camera phones around in them days to tell you, because that would have been in the papers.
Yeah.
But so even for myself and all the other guys, the girls in the military that have come forward, have all had all the previous inoculations and stuff. But we know. I'll use an example. I know 3 people in the military that have had heart attacks.
Yeah.
Within 48 hours of having their jab.
Yeah, time. Yeah.
Before that, I've known like one person to have a heart attack under 40. Now I personally know 11 males under 40 who have had heart attacks within days of having their vaccination. There isn't a coincidence there.
No, absolutely not. I mean, obviously, you played at a very high level of football. I mean, look at the celebrities, the footballers. When are they actually going to be brave enough to stand up and put their head above the parapet?
Well, I know there are players now doing it, because I've seen it. There's a lot of Bournemouth players that have been speaking out about it as well. And like we were talking about the other day, it is a massive, serious issue. There's been 108 FIFA registered coaches and players that have actually died of heart failure in 6 months.
Wow!
Which is hundreds of percents higher than in any years previous. So there's no coincidences there. The data is there in the data, and what people don't realise is there's going to be a lot of professional football players now and athletes across all sports. They're actually looking at people looking at their peers collapsing on fields after having felt like they need to have the jab themselves. They're probably shitting themselves.
Yeah.
Because they're going to feel like, Christ, well, I know that this person's been vaccinated, so have I. And it would play on their minds.
Yeah, I mean, I think again, this is why it's important at this time for people to, when you understand that you're in a war, you're more likely to make the right decisions, but also you have the knowing that it's going to end. Because at the moment, because it's so psychologically driven, and it's constant, isn't it? And we know, and we've known right from the beginning, that because this was sped up and only allowed to be released under emergency powers and is in trial till 2023, this doesn't. The bad guys don't stop this. This goes right the way through to Agenda 20 for the World Economic Forum. We all know that side of it, but we need, knowing that there has been military activity, I think is pivotal to actually put out there now for discussion, and it will help people make the right decision, because wars end, right? So someone has to either concede, put down their weapons and say, put their hands up in the air. That's what happens generally. But if you don't make the right decision before that time and you stay on this side, you will be put in that box, won't you? You will be held accountable for all your actions. This is another devious side to this, how they changed the Green Book for the NHS staff and made individual people responsible in their own capacity. And that was done under the radar. So most people, we go back to every institution, you can probably say 10% somewhere are bad, but all the others are good people trapped in the bad system. And that's probably the same in the military, it's probably the same in the NHS, probably the same in the police force. But the reason people keep talking about the Nuremberg trial and everything else is because when the time actually comes, you're not going to be able to say, I was simply following orders.
No.
And this has to stop. And going on the thread back to the footballers, if this went the bad way, there would be no football, there would be no fans. You know, but if you don't step up now, you're not going to have any fans either.
Exactly, yeah.
Because you will have been complicit in this whole agenda. And this is the manipulation of all of this. This is the divide and conquer.
And the sloping shoulders.
Yeah, and the sloping shoulders and everything else. Oh, I can't make the decision. You need to speak to the person upstairs. We know how it goes.
But then the people upstairs have been very quick to just go like that to the people in different industries, haven't they? And said, like, you need to take responsibility here, but you must get all these people done.
Yeah.
Which is what you see in the military, obviously, side of things. But again, like you said, just following orders will not wash. And this will go to trial. So again, just like there's obviously clear and obvious military action and things happening in the background, there's a lot of legal stuff happening in the background.
Absolutely, yeah.
So Ryan Formick, for example, who's been one of the lead people on this, lawyers, he's a US and German attorney, he's been working tirelessly, like interviewing people, person after person after person after person after person, which is all evidence which could be used in either a public inquiry or in the International Criminal Court. I mean, they were laying the papers for the International Criminal Court some time ago, but I believe it didn't go further. I think there's a lot of trust issues there from, I know, Reiner and the team against like, even the International Criminal Court about the people being complicit and corrupt within that system as well. So it's gathering evidence. So people watching who've watched a lot of Reiner's podcasts probably thinking like, why are they doing something? Why are they in court right now? You know, where's all the military courts and helmets and stuff like that? He's doing what he's doing to gather massive amounts of evidence from a scientific, political, behavioural science, medical point of view, military point of view, all this kind of stuff has to be collated to gain the maximum impact and the maximum result, just like it did in the original Nuremberg.
Well, this is also an interesting point that a lot of people missed back in January when they were doing the, let's call it the fake inauguration. I don't want to give them too much credit. But Major General Walker, William Walker, was interviewed on ABC News. And his specific response when he was asked why the National Guard were there, what he said was to provide a smooth transition to military power. Now, generals don't tend to trip up when, you know, they're not nervous types of character. And then he did a deflection, which is obviously something they're taught how to do. But if you go back and watch that video, which I urge everyone to go and look at, it's Major General William Walker. Go on ABC News in January, and you know you can't get much of a clearer indication that there is a military task going. And then just after that, which is another interesting concept, is prior to that administration being taken over. Obviously, General Flynn was the bad guy, wasn't he? And then, as soon as the other administration supposedly were in power, Major General Flynn's brother was made commander of the Pacific Fleet of the Navy. And then after that, 9 of the heads of the Pentagon were retired, of the 11. So they left 2 there. So
does that clear and obvious that Biden and his administration have no clear power over the military whatsoever?
None at all.
And he doesn't even travel on Air Force One?
No, none at all.
Yeah. Again, this is like, this is all optics and things that the British population, for example, especially, our media have very much enclosed everything to what's just happening here. They won't show you all the rallies and the pure tyranny that's happening in Australia. You know, likewise, they don't go into too much detail about what's happening in the United States. But Biden has clearly no power over the military whatsoever.
No, which is a big consideration because it shows you that whoever's controlling the military are hitting specific targets as a counter to what's going on, which means we are in a war, but it's not. We've got someone protecting us. Whereas I think for the last 2 years, people have just thought, New World Order's taken over, we're going into chips, you know, dystopian, tyrannical, by 2030, nothing, but you'll be happy as he strokes his furry white cat. And, everyone's enslaved and potentially 500 million people left on the planet. I mean, that's how sinister it is. And that's why I think it's important to have the discussion about, are we at war? And if we are at war, who's actually backing us? And that's why you have to discuss the stuff overseas.
Yeah.
It's...
Well, this is another reason why the podcast, my show is not just focused on what's happening in this country. This is why I've been getting nurses, doctors, teachers, frontline people from Australia, for example, succumb to these like ridiculous mandates that they've rolled out over there that are absolute crimes against humanity. They go against all human rights, all Nuremberg Code. It's literally like they've had human rights legislation in one hand, Nuremberg Code in the other, just thrown them on the floor and trampled on them whilst laughing. That's pretty much like what they've done in that kind of analogy. But what we're seeing, in the States, the UK, and Australia is so important to understand the correlation between those three places.
It is, yeah. I mean, it is getting to the stage now where it definitely seems to be speeding up, and people are responding to things so much quicker.
What do you think that on that, just from a UK point of view? I've got my views on this because of what I experienced, the messages I receive, emails, etc., etc. What do you think it is right now that's waking so many people up in the UK at this particular time?
I think the massive. When we look at that 40% are on the fence split to 30 that are really awake, I think the tide's turning within that 40% because, let's be honest, a lot of work on the 90-10 are good people and 10 aren't. The majority of them would have genuinely, for the right reasons, wanted to go and get the jab. They would have, some of them would have said, I'm doing it, I want to keep my family safe, I want to keep the kids safe and everything. So I think now this booster is coming. I mean, we've been telling people this for ages, because when they bought out the cards, there's 8 spaces for different jabs. But they feel cheated, they feel lied to. They can see now there's something wrong.
So it started at 1.
Yeah, and we know what they're going to do and what their intentions are. It's because in a week's time, the double vaccinated become unvaccinated. And I started off really angry at the beginning of last year. Couldn't understand what people were doing. Even in the first lockdown, I was going to London, meeting people that were flying in from Spain. I was like, everyone else is sat at home. And everything's actually still running, everything's normal. It really did my head in. Like, I've talked to so many people that they've got the same experiences. But yeah, what they're going to do is they're going to use it to manipulate the statistics like they did last year with the flu. There's probably already been an increase in deaths over the last 2 months.
Well, Dr. Asim said that the other day, said there's already a 10,000 increase in deaths compared to the last 5 years.
So after next week, every single death recorded, unless they've had the booster, they're unvaccinated. So it's just another trickery, fudging of statistics. And let's be honest, this whole thing is a pandemic of the testing. Because if there was no overall increase in mortality last year, where were the statistics coming from? They were just coming from the tests, which Dominic Raab said it, Boris said it, 9 out of 10 false positives. And people were willingly doing it.
People still don't know. They're willingly, the minute they got a sniffle, they're shoving these tests up their noses.
But since whenever have you had to test yourself to see if you're sick in the first place?
No, it's been done by a physician, clinically, to be diagnosed with something. The fact that we said it time and time
if you're asymptomatic, if you're not feeling sick, why would you want to test yourself?
Well, because the government said so. Because you're sick until proven healthy, and that is basically what we've been drummed into. And we see it time and time again. The inventor of the PCR test said categorically not to be used as a diagnostic tool. And it's been completely manipulated. The CDC said a few months ago now that it does not differentiate between flus, colds, COVID, all the rest of it. Right. So if that's the case, how are you even testing variants from somebody's initial test? We get 97% or whatever it is false positives. And I asked the question several times now. They've come out and actively said this and admitted it, but yet the lockdowns, especially the ones in January, when they were instigated, from then till I think it was April, there was 300,000 UK businesses folded and they'll never reopen their doors again. And it's based off the tests.
Yeah.
The tests is what, and these cases and numbers were used by Sage Group, Chris Whitty's, Van Towns, all the rest of it, to advise the government that all these huge high numbers need to put us into lockdown.
Yeah.
And then these lockdowns caused all these businesses unlawfully to close. That's 300,000 businesses. Like,
I think 60% of restaurants in New York never reopened after the first lockdown.
Exactly.
You know,
and people think that is okay. And then out of all of those people, how many people are now completely bankrupt?
Yeah.
Mental health issues, suicides, families torn apart, all this kind of stuff. You know, you don't hear about all that.
No.
But like, that is like what happens just in the UK. So can you imagine what's happening in other countries around the world? And then people talk about, oh, you know, yeah, but I don't want to get this virus. I don't want to get this. I need to go and do this. You know, the sheer devastation. But at the same time, they're like, I don't want to get the virus, but I can't book a doctor's appointment because the waiting list has just gone through the roof. You know, people with like severe acute illnesses can't even be seen, and then those who aren't vaccinated now find themselves being turned away from hospitals in the UK, which is again massively illegal.
Yeah.
Against so many human rights, Nuremberg codes, the fact that the British people pay taxes and national insurance and have done for years. You know, things that go on in this NHS in this country are fucking sinister as hell.
Mate, it's horrific, isn't it? And just as you're talking, I'm thinking about that 40%. Let's be honest, most of them will be jabbed. But I think that they'll be more open now because they know they've been conned. And I think having all the historical research you've done and everything else, just share it with them again. We've got to try and bring more of them onto our side because when we're talking about this conflict, this war, and we know we're going to win, it's the damage limitation after the event because there's going to be so many angry people, you know, whose mums and dads have been killed in nursing homes, parents who've made a stupid decision and sent their children to have the jab. They themselves feeling absolutely gutted that they weren't awake and couldn't see what was happening. So we need to bring them in under our fold, be kind and be compassionate and actually help them through this process because, and I think this is also another reason why the veteran communities come together at this late stage, is because we can assist by integrating into local communities, helping them with our skill sets. I mean, to be fair, in my county, the people there have got it so well squared away anyway. You know, I just help with the serving and the notice of liability and everything else. Everything else they've had going for months. But this is where, you know, there's no point where a load of veterans sat on a side, sat there doing nothing. You know, this is why, you know, our good friend Pete set up another veteran site which is working on, which is going to launch. It's going to take time, you know, veterans with purpose. But we want everyone to come together and actually it will be veterans running a veteran site. And we'll be able to use your experience, our experience with business to be able to actually place veterans in positions. I mean, from the military perspective, you've got everything from a trench digger to a surgeon, as far as professionalisms go. And everyone's capable of stepping up. And, you know, we can help them integrate back into society. We can work with people with PTSD through the coaching that you do and everything else.
Yeah, absolutely. And so obviously next year is going to be like a really, really critical time in history, I think. Absolutely massive critical time for history. And I constantly keep saying it. what a fucking time to be alive. And I'm sure my amazing granddad, who many people who follow me know a lot about, said the same thing, like during wartime when he was, commander of people fighting tyranny, ridding tyranny from Europe. And I think, just having that, taking a step back and actually having that, those thoughts about what our forefathers did back in the Second World War, for example, it's deeply sad to see that it just seems to be forgotten about at the minute, and that people are just willing to just chuck their freedoms away, comply to these ridiculous mandates, because that's exactly what they're doing.
But this is why we're having this discussion today, because we're trying to wake people up to the fact that it's a war, and it's for the majority it's invisible because it's so psychologically driven. But when you can get your head around it, and you can go and look at the churches being blown up, the vaccine centres being blown up, look at Beirut, the cathedrals, you can see that there's activity, the dams, the tunnels, the earthquakes. I mean, 3 earthquakes in a week at RAF Stansbridge. That was the underground listening tunnels during the Second World War. Those tunnels go all the way up to Bletchley Park and MK, Milton Keynes, and then all through London. It's an extensive network of tunnelling. Not something that we were ever privy to. But the evidence is there, and it doesn't take a lot of research. I mean, just from memory recall, it took me 5 minutes just to get them up. So I know they're up there. So just go and have a look and be confident that there is a good element actually in the shadows. Not so much now, because the information is coming closer and closer together, which gives me a lot of confidence, and also the fact that people are waking up quicker and quicker as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And on that, I've got Ricardo Bossi actually coming on the show, which I'm quite excited about.
He's a legend.
From a military perspective as well, to talk to him a lot about that. And obviously what's happening in Australia, that he's been, actively fighting against from day one. 24 years in the Australian military, SAS. He's coming on the show, which will be Friday, the 3rd of December. Just before we go, mate, obviously you've been serving a lot of notice of liabilities to a lot of schools, putting them on notice, which has had a fantastic effect in your county. Would you mind just explaining to the viewers at home, like, what the process is, and how you go about sort of like delivering it, and what is actually effectively, what's the point of it?
It's twofold. I've been doing two sides of this, because there's actually a military cease and desist, which is very to the point. It's basically every COVID measure, testing, mask wearing, stop immediately. It's addressed from the top, commanders, addressed to Prime Minister. Little caveats at the bottom, but it's being logged. There's 700 people on a Telegram group that have served. So they've got they put a data sheet together 8 months ago. Every school in the UK, A to Z, and people have picked A or A, B, C, and gone through the list. They've all been served. Every single MP, same thing through the alphabet. They've all been logged. There was a group called Commando first put that together. They are going to be actioned at some point. But what we've done in addition to that is put a legal notice of liability together with the help of people like Anna, and they're being served in person or by email or by registered post. It depends what you feel comfortable with, but they are putting the headmaster normally, the deputy, the safeguarding team, border governors and parent governors on notice that should a child be injured or worse still die, they will be held personally responsible in their own capacity. That is sent off with an evidence package and the latest statistics from the government website. So, and the truth is, once We've tried to follow up, and we have followed up a couple of times. We managed to pause the school-age immunisation programme for 12 to 15-year-olds in Dorset. That wasn't just myself; that was a concerted effort with everyone in the community, badgering and doing it. But it's important to keep any correspondence or any read receipt that you get from the emails, just as future evidence. The thing it does do is it allows you to then engage in further conversations. And I've since spoken to the Trust, and they have said that they are concerned, and this is now another common thread with the teachers, headmasters. They say that there's a problem, but we can't speak about it, whereas before they were so dismissive. And the other thing to bear in mind with the schools is the JCVI, the Joint Commissions for Vaccines and Immunisation, they actually, on the 3-month period before the children went back to school in September, they stated very clearly that they didn't think it would be a good idea to roll out a vaccination programme for the children. It's actually the government that ignored their own scientific advisors and went ahead and did it. So, again, no one, whereas last year we were getting a really... we were getting the door shut on us a lot, and they were just saying, look, actually it's nothing to do with us, we're following Public Health England. That's now not the case. They now know they're on notice and they've got no backup. So
that's just the same across the board though, isn't it? No one's coming to save you.
Yeah, so personally you keep pushing, because one will break, because ultimately, this is why I do think it's important again that if you realise you're in a conflict situation, someone loses, and their days are numbered because they're killing children. Let's be honest.
But those children have died. There's many children that have had myocarditis, pericarditis, and other heart problems. Obviously, all the other adverse reactions, shingles, all kinds of horrible stuff that children are having. We've got children in the local hospital with myocarditis as we speak.
Yeah, I know. There's one of your football.
There's a young lad in the local football team who had it. And again, it's all done through a system of coercion, telling people that it's absolutely fine. Nothing's happened to anybody because this is the stuff that's been told to
There
us.
is no legal consent, is there? Because
not at all.
Because there's not anyone putting that in your that knows the full ingredients. There's no one that actually has any data on it. Half of them don't even know it's in trial till 2023. It's criminal. And
half of the doctors and nurses don't even know what the yellow card system is.
No.
And that's another scary thing.
Well, then you've got those absolute, those two TV celebrities tearing up the data from a government site on television. I mean, the police should go in there and arrest them. This is another conversation. To be honest, this is where vets are possibly going to play a role in the future. There's a president malfeasance in a public office. It's basically you're actually implementing something that you think is legal, but you're doing it in the wrong way. So then they haven't taken the time to find out or do the background on the knowledge. So they can't actually. They have no excuse. They should know everything that we know about the danger of these bioweapons and the gene therapy. And so early on, they changed the name, didn't they, to a jab or a shot? Because they knew people were going to switch on to the fact that it's not a bloody vaccine. The whole thing. Most people who are awake know this, but the message is to the paramedics, to the police, and the other services, is you have no choice now. And you won't have a job either way. If you don't step up now and come forward, you'll never ever be able to work again because you will have been complicit in crimes against humanity. It is literally getting to that stage. And this is why it's important to have these discussions. And I think knowing that we're in a war is a good starting point. And being able to prove that we're in a war by showing people, going on your search engines and showing them, look, if we weren't in a war, all these vaccine centres being blown up. Why is that being blown up? This is what Ricardo Bosse's hidden message was telling us. We will have our D-Day. There will be an optical event, possibly, or something that happens. But don't panic, because all the hard lifting has been done, and we're going to win.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, there's already arrests been taking place in the background. There's obviously that large Maxwell case that's happening right now.
And this is all distraction, isn't it? I mean, I literally, when they told us about when they said the name of the new variant, I think it must have been less than a second. Someone just said moronic. People are saying they've got it now.
That's good.
And even the people that aren't quite, they'll come over.
So I think, from my point of view, I've seen a lot of, especially within my own circles, is people that got jabbed for what they thought was the right reasons. Protect family, wanted to travel, all that kind of stuff, right? Absolutely fair enough. We all do things for what we believe is the right thing at the time for us and our family, and that's the beauty of having choices, the beauty of freedom, right? Now that they're obviously introducing this booster thing, people are like, hang on a minute, like originally it was 1, then it went to 2, now it's like on kids, and then now it's like you now need 3, or you're not even vaccinated. So obviously that in itself is making a lot of people step back and go, nah, and off. But also the time it's now dragged out, people are seeing what's happening in Australia, especially here in the UK. People are then seeing what's happening in France, seeing what's happening in Italy. The fact that Austria are locking down unvaccinated people, for something that cannot stop you from getting it, cannot stop you transmitting it. So there's no science or logic just in that sentence on its own. So I think for me, that's why I'm seeing like a big shift. And obviously we've been spending time with police and stuff like that, shifting them, because the paramedics and the police are obviously seeing a huge rise in call-outs to children and people under 40 with blood clot strokes and heart attacks and things along those lines on a grand scale. A huge percentage increase. So obviously they speak about this kind of stuff, which makes them put 2 and 2 together. But for the viewers at home, in regards to putting people on notice, the notice of liability you can serve to schools, you can serve to workplaces, you can serve to doctor surgeries, because they are actively refusing people entry, without masks.
We've done
if they've not had vaccinations, all this kind of stuff. Again, just goes to show how sinister it is. But you can find these documents, ladies and gents, on my website. So it's mrajroberts.com/community. That'll take you straight to my forum I've had set up for this purpose. There's a load of different legal documents in there. The notice of liabilities there. You can fill it in. Obviously, it's a delete insert type of document. There's stuff on there also to do with like mask mandates. There's stuff to do with like the no jab, no job letters that you can obviously send off as well. So plenty of templates, and also a place for you to register your business as well. Because like many other people, I've decided I want to only buy my Christmas gifts this year from small businesses, not feed the pockets of Amazon, especially Tesco and such like. And I encourage you guys to do the same. I think again we talked about briefly here. This whole thing is going to be very much about unity. It's going to be about being stronger together, which I talk about often, because we are. We've both been in military units, and we know the power of being stronger together, right? And what it does for you. Always playing to people's strengths and helping those improve their weaknesses. That's what's massively important. Just come on the show today, mate.
No, been amazing.
Enjoyed it?
Yeah, I have. I'll be honest with you. Davey. I've had a lot of firsts this last 2 years. I've never spoken on the couch. It's never really been my thing, but I feel this is so important.
Are you going to start your own show now?
No. just going back to notice of liability. My younger children weren't in the age group to start with, and my older children, were informed and they can make their own decisions. But the compelling thing that drove me is for all children, and I knew that when they eventually got to the children, there would be adults that weren't awake, who weren't going to protect their children. So that was my driving force, and I think if anyone even if you don't have children, you can still get involved with the serving of these notices, because ultimately it's all our responsibility as adults to protect the kids, across the board. So I just think, let's do it.
Yeah, 100%. Absolutely.
And it's not all, we didn't do this just to fill people up with hopium and everything else. This isn't going to stop. We were out last week doing schools. I mean, we go on the ground, we go to the park. I mean, a lot of people don't even realise that you're not just sat in front of a camera. I mean, you're out every day, every weekend, from your football coaching, then you go to a stand in the park. And I think what you've done is incredible, and I know your grandfather would be really proud of it.
No, cheers, mate. And I say it all the time, and I literally feel like I'm living in his footsteps. And he's a legend of a man. But again, he's one of millions of people who fought, and obviously many died for our very freedoms, that people are just happy to just wash away at the minute, and that it's going to affect all our kids.
Yeah.
And we're not just doing it for our kids, we're doing it for all kids, right? And this is the message I have: people who question what I'm doing or think I'm a nut job, or even people for yourself, they don't realise that what we're doing is for them and their children as well.
Absolutely.
Their obligation now is just to actually do a bit more research, ask the right questions, and they will soon see how sinister this really is, and what the agenda actually is. And when you see it, again, you can't unsee it.
I think it's important as well. I mean, because virtually everyone we speak to has gone through the same divisive thing with their families, and I think the message is, I think we had this discussion the other day. If I'd rather fall out temporarily with a member of my family, but make sure they're safe, right? And
relationships,
yes, exactly, and they'll come back to you. So, like you said, they're all the heroes. To be honest, all the people that have taken to the streets, it's grown from thousands to millions. And I think everyone you speak to will say they felt alone at the beginning of this, and they thought they were going crazy, and half the family thought they were going crazy. So that's why the community thing is so powerful, and I think, you're spot on, stronger together. Together everyone achieves more, all the Chad mnemonics. But this really is a changing time.
Yeah, absolutely, mate. And I can't reiterate that enough. I think just keep reaching out, widen your circle. If you have felt alone, go to your local stand in the parks, join communities online, get on Zoom calls. I'm going to be doing a lot of Zoom calls now, similar to what I did last week for a different grade. So I was quite overwhelmed actually. There's a few hundred people on there. When I actually thought it was just so that's spurred me on with a good friend of mine to do sort of like a couple of those Zoom calls each week that people can then go on. It'll be a slightly different topic each time, but again, it's getting people to understand, kind of what's going on in particular areas, outside the podcast as well. So that obviously I'm coming from a place where we're fully embedded with these experts from around the world. So it's not just my opinion; it's not just our opinion. This is stuff that we clarify and validate with genuine experts. So it's not just me going like, I think everyone's going to get a microchip in the forehead and start walking around, and like all these beams are going to start coming out people's heads and that. It's not like that at all. That everything that we do is all validated externally through experts in their field, who are being suppressed and silenced, and which is another bit of a red flag, which should be for many people.
Yeah, I mean that's another discussion we had about the war, wasn't it? I mean, what's the correlation with the Third Reich, the Fourth Reich going into schools and burning books that was against their narrative is exactly what they've done with the internet. There's so many signs and signals, and because it's been 2 years, you can't, always recall them straight from your memory. But on that initiative as well, I mean, Madeline and her business partner, my wife, they're going into town centres, speaking to businesses, not going down the other route, but saying, are you going to allow this medical apartheid to take place? Are you going to discriminate between jabbed and they're 90% of them are saying no, and this is something that if we continue to do on a local level and empower people, we'll keep businesses open. And it's unenforceable because it's not legal. you know, speaking to the legal experts. None of this. This is all.
Well, I mean, that gentleman the other day just won a court case, got thrown out in the end, didn't it? Because he kept his gym open during the lockdown.
Yeah.
And they were chucking fines at him, enforcement orders, and he just stood his ground.
Absolutely, what a legend. And they've not enforced one fine.
No.
During
they've all been thrown out.
Yeah.
And that's the same in every country.
Yeah, I know, yeah.
It's not just here, it's like the same in Canada, the same in Australia. You know. And you know, that police officer in Australia has obviously come out and been speaking at the rally saying that they literally brought these out to scare people into the mandates and the lockdowns and stuff.
Yeah.
And, you know, they're ridiculous. So the lady I had on my podcast recently, Jane, the teacher, her husband owns a business, he's unjabbed, and he has to keep the back door open. Because if the authorities come in, he's got to like make himself scarce. Because if they find out he's running a business unvaccinated, he gets a $109,000 fine.
That's an interesting number. 19.
But what, you know, again, like who has that money just floating around?
Yeah. I mean, you might as well say $1 million because you're not going to get it.
Exactly.
Anyway.
But yeah, thanks for
We've
had a really great insightful conversation. Yeah. I think it's good from a military perspective to talk about where things are like within the veteran community, what you've seen, how our skill sets allow us to basically see a lot of things what they are. You know, we've got a lot of worldwide experience.
Yeah.
And kind of in a way kind of desensitized to a lot of like the trauma and the chaos. Really, it's quite an accustomed skill, isn't it, in the military, to be able to step back and assess the situation in what you would deem a high pressured environment. And when you can actually tap into that over this whole saga, you know, things can become very, very apparent of what's happening because you can really see the big picture, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
Cool. Ladies and gents, thank you very much for tuning in today. We've got another, obviously, big week this week. I've got a couple of more doctors coming on the show from Australia and the UK. We've got, obviously, Ricardo Bossi, as I mentioned, and we've also got Mr. David Icke coming on the show. Many of you will have known him over the last 30 years. He's been obviously chucking out all of this information and predictions of what would be happening in the future, and now we're seeing it all unfold. So it'd be really quite remarkable having him on the show to share all of that, like everything from, you know, how he's been ridiculed to now we're fully seeing the extent of what he talked about literally unfolding before our eyes. So I also like to take this opportunity to thank you all for your amazing support. As I mentioned recently, the support from you guys and the sharing of the podcast, the tagging friends and family, all that kind of stuff really helps drive it and get it to the people that really need this information. It's had a fantastic impact because obviously the level and the number of emails and DMs that I receive has just gone through the roof to the point where I'm having to get help in to actually answer all of them because I can't physically do it myself. And that's all down to you guys being amazing. So I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for that and helping to drive the show forward. If you haven't done so already, again, please check out mrajroberts.com/community where you'll find all those templates and letters and medical information that you may need. And I want to take this opportunity to really ask you at this point to keep opening your eyes, keep connecting with people, keep communicating, keep doing what you're doing, keep protecting the kids. And I guarantee you, with everything else going on in the background, as we talked about today, you know, there will be a much brighter future for us all. We've all got our part to play. You know, don't think that just because you're sat at home and you might click the share button, you're not doing anything. Just that one share to friends and family can help just that one person. If we're helping one person, we're winning. All right? And imagine that ripple effect that then has across other people and parts of the world. Take care of yourself, and I will see you next time on the AJ Roberts Show.